167. Let's get to Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is the first of 5 in the Indiana Jones franchise, and you can get the entire franchise show at filmbuds.bandcamp.com or listen to them individually as you are here. So, Raiders of the Lost Ark came out in 1981, directed by Steven Spielberg, stars Harrison Ford, Karen Allen, Paul Freeman, John Rhys Davies, Ronald Lacey, Denholm Elliott, Alfred Molina, and many others. And the synopsis is, in 1936, archaeologist and adventurer Indiana Jones is hired by the U.S. government to find the Ark of the Covenant before the Nazis can obtain its awesome powers. So, Indiana Jones, I've been wanting to try and get an in-depth review of this whole franchise for a while. It's just very special to me, so it's kind of really even hard to talk about and do it in the right way to give it due justice. But I figured, hey, let's get it out there. Let's do it. Enough is enough. And for anyone who has listened to the show for a while knows I'm a huge Indiana Jones fan, and it's really one of my all-time favorite characters ever. I love Steven Spielberg just in general. I love Harrison Ford, but there's something about this character, especially even just over the last few years of my life, where something has connected so like intimately and deeply with this character and this world, this whole franchise as a whole, that it's honestly one of the things that helps keep me going. I can always go to it as a comfort. I just find that character to be inspiring, relatable, really one of the most grounded characters that I've ever come across in movies. I don't know exactly what it is. I'm sure it's a combination of factors, but there's just a realism to him that don't really get very often, either when this first came out or even, especially now in this day and age. So I think Indiana Jones is honestly a very underrated franchise. Obviously, it's had a lot of success, but to me, I think with all the franchises that are out there, I almost never hear Indiana Jones mentioned all that much anymore, which is too bad, because I think it's a fantastic series, and there's a lot of unique, funny, emotional, dramatic, epic qualities to it that don't get enough praise, especially now. So if you haven't seen any of them before, I would start with this one, of course, it being the first one, but I highly, highly recommend that you check these movies out if you have not yet, or go revisit them if it's been a while. Anyways, I think at this point I've seen this movie maybe a half a dozen times. I've seen all of them about that same amount, and this was the first one I watched. And I think one thing that I didn't even really think about until recently that I really appreciate about this first movie is it's not really an origin story. We don't have to see him going through college and, becoming an archaeologist, learning how to be an archaeologist, being an adventurer, how he truly came to be. It's just, here he is on a adventure, on a archaeological dig, and he's that character. You don't really need to know that much. And it's similar to how Harrison Ford is with Han Solo, where he's such a broad archetype that you don't need a lot of backstory. But you don't really see many franchises now that start off with a big character like this, where you don't have to go through a 30, 45-minute, hour-long, or even full movie length origin story that you don't usually need. And so I think the succinctness of this one, just getting right into it, is a very, very brilliant choice. And of course, I don't want to bore people if you are already an Indiana Jones fan or you've heard a lot of these reviews in other ways. I apologize, but this, of course, is a movie that has been talked about a ton over the years. It's probably considered to be one of the best adventure movies of all time, one of the defining adventure movies of all time. So I don't mean to repeat what other people may have said, but it is one of my top 5, or this series is really in my top 5 favorite movies of all time. So I still want to get my thoughts out there no matter what. I'll try and keep it as new and interesting as I can. Well, I think just starting off, the opening scene with where he has the rock and he replaces it with what he's trying to take, and then the arrows start flying. I love that whole sequence where you really get that immediate injection into what he does and who he is, and then all the different types of double crossers that he deals with over all 5 movies, where they seem to be on his side and they're actually not, and then they betray him, and he just has to go off on his own and just somehow gets out alive. And even though this obviously is a very influential franchise and character, I think if you look at a character like Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean, you see a lot of similarities where Indiana Jones is a very smart character, of course. He has a doctorate, amongst other things. But he still, when he gets into the adventure part of his job and his life, he just somehow manages to get out of things, usually by luck. Like, he's not really, he's not a James Bond or someone where he has some elaborate plan set up. He just says, oh, shoot, this is happening. Oh, here's a rope to swing away on. Here's a broken down car that may work. Or, oops, this huge column fell almost right next to me when it was supposed to fall on me, and I can get away. It's just little things where that's something that makes it feel very real. And that's what brings me back to, long story short here, sorry, how Jack Sparrow kind of plays out, where you don't know if he's actually a moron and he's just getting lucky, or if he's actually thinking of all this through, and he just tries to play himself off as oblivious and unable to do anything properly just so he can then have that upper hand. So that's something that really does work for me. At least, I don't know how other people feel, but that's a kind of character I love, where that's life, really. Even if you're a super, super skilled special agent, stuff is always going to go wrong. You're always going to end up getting lucky more often than not. And plans never go as they're supposed to. So I think that's something that I wish, honestly, more movies would do. And I think they, more and more these days, they try and come across as, we have this iron tight plan. Everything's going to go fine, and there's not really a humanity to it, groundedness, where obviously things would go wrong, and things always go wrong in the Indiana Jones franchise, and we're so happy that he gets away. So I really like that. The score, amazing. The Indiana Jones theme is iconic, one of my favorites of all time. It's amazing. John Williams is, of course, a absolute legend. Steven Spielberg is my favorite director of all time, and especially 1 and 3 are 2 of my favorites of his across his whole career. Harrison Ford, I think even before, because I had seen Star Wars before I saw these, and I'd seen a lot of his other movies like Blade Runner, things like that. So I was pretty late getting to Indiana Jones. I think I only saw it probably in college for the first time. And I think one thing that works with Harrison Ford, and it's almost similar to like Ryan Gosling, where there's that effortlessness to them, and it doesn't even seem like they're actually acting that much, but at least most of the time, I'd say they are. And whether people like that or not, I think that some actors just have that knack, and they can be so natural and restrained and just work, sometimes even better than people who are very, very outward and theatrical with how they perform. So I think he's perfect for that character. He has the charm, he has the humor, the physicality. So it really is perfect casting, like one of the best castings of all Spielberg's career. And of course, George Lucas, this was his idea to do Indiana Jones in this way, and he wanted Spielberg to direct. He said, all right, well, if you're going to do 1, I want you to do 2 more. So that's how we got the first 3. And then he, of course, went on to do a 4th as well. But talking more specifically about big scenes besides the opening, the first time you see Harrison Ford teaching, I love the women in the class that he sees who have written "love you" on their eyelids. And so every time they close their eyelids, it shows "love you" to Indiana Jones while he's teaching. And he notices that and just gets immediately flustered and tries to focus and distract himself from that. Then we meet Karen Allen, or Marion's character, for the first time, and they've had this history together. And that's another thing in terms of the origin. We don't need to see them meeting for the first time. We can understand, all right, they've had a history together. We understand. Move on. That's another great writing choice and storytelling choice. Just show it. Hey, we've had history, bad history, good history. We're good. Let's move on with the story. We can infer the rest from context. And that whole sequence in the bar, I love. Like, I mean, even visually, the snow with the fire, but some little moments of Spielberg humor, especially, it's very Spielbergian, is when the shootout starts and barrels of alcohol are being hit and spewing all over the place. You see Marion, while she's shooting, take cover, and then she sees a little hose of alcohol coming out of, like, leaking out of a barrel, and she gets a little drink as she's shooting. Like, she gets cover, drink, and then starts shooting again. I think that's so clever. And then probably one of the most well-known or referenced ones of the franchise, but especially of this movie, is when they're in the Middle East and there's that swordsman who's swinging the sword like super, super masterfully, and he's about to, getting ready to fight Indiana Jones in this square, and Indiana Jones is, terrified to, like, oh God, like, what am I going to do? And then instead of there being what you would expect, the typical elaborate, crazy choreography, 10-minute long sword fight where you see Indiana Jones fighting for his life, you see him just take out his pistol and shoot him. That is so one of the most human moments in a movie, where in most movie fight scenes, you would be like, all right, the character's just got to lay down his weapon. He's going to fight this guy hand to hand, no matter what. We have to see this epic fight. And then, like, no, actually, in real life, if you had a gun, just shoot him and move on. So it shows you how realistically people like Spielberg, George Lucas, all of them thought for this character. And that really, really shows. But besides that, characters like John Rhys-Davies plays Sala. He went on to be Gimli in Lord of the Rings. That's where I first saw him. I didn't even know he was in this franchise till I saw the movie for the first time. Alfred Molina, he shows up for a little bit. I mean, it's a very, very good cast. Spielberg has a great eye for casting. The locations are awesome. Like, it goes really all across different parts of the world, different visual styles, snow, desert, jungle. So it has really everything in it, and it really did set the standard. Not to say this is new to get out there, but really did set the standard for how most adventure movies now try to structure themselves. All right, where are we going to set this story? What locations are we going to go to? Who are we going to see? That sort of thing. So all that holds up really, really well. The jumping towards the end briefly here, the face melting scene, those effects still look awesome and are just gross. The scene in the tomb where they see the snakes, that's really, really well done. And that shows you another part of his character where he's comes across as super brave and courageous. He can do anything. He'll go anywhere, but he's terrified of snakes. And he immediately has that, oh crap, there are snakes all around me. And it's not trying to say, oh, well, snakes don't bother me. I'm not scared of anything. Like, well, I have my weakness. And the production design of that tomb, and really the production design of the whole movie, is very, very strong. The sequence where he's being dragged behind the truck is great. The fight around the airplane that's turning and then the guy eventually gets pushed into the blades is fantastic. I wouldn't say I have any issues with it. I think the only thing in terms of which one is my favorite, I think the only thing that would bring this one down slightly in that comparison, not star rating wise, but just purely talking about, all right, which one is even better than the other. I think the only thing structure wise that I notice is with 3, which is my favorite, spoiler, I think that the first one, for about the first half or 2/3, is moving fluidly through different locations and has more of a momentum, and then they sort of get stuck in one area for the rest of the movie for the most part. And I think that in 3, one thing I like is it's, for the most part, it's really glides along in different places until the very end. And so I think in terms of how things are set up, how they're structured, the pacing, that's the only thing I really prefer in that way with 3 over 1. So I think 1 is very, very close to 3, The Last Crusade, but I think that's the only thing I would ever, if I had to, gun to my head, point out that I notice is that. But very, very minute, insignificant issue. So I think it is still an absolute masterpiece, one of the best movies of all time. I will forever love it, and I'm so thankful that this franchise came to be, because I think it's so unique, so timeless and grounded and inspiring and entertaining. And amongst other things, I just will never tire of it. And yeah, check it out. That is a heavy, heavy, heavy 5 out of 5.